So we're studying Rashi Acharei Mos, a short week. A short week. It's going to be hard to get through the whole portion, but luckily for us, we're familiar with this portion because we read it on Yom Kippur. So it's in the book of Vayikra, which is usually translated as Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 1.
635.
635. Chapter 16, verse 1 from the book of Vayikra. And of course, this is one of my favorite portions because we read it on Yom Kippur, one of my favorite days of the year. So,
But it doesn't have the emotion of the other readings. It's very.
Well, that's a very good point. It doesn't have the emotion of you mean the Rosh Hashanah readings. But on the other hand, look how it starts. We can't overlook this first verse, which is so powerful. Now, God spoke to Moshe, Acharei Mos, Shnei b'nei Aaron, after the death of the two sons of Aaron. You can't take that for granted. We read it every year. We read every year that Aaron's sons died. But can you imagine just the overwhelming pain Aaron must have been feeling, and the sense of helplessness, and inability to connect to anything, the darkness that must have descended upon him at that moment. And so God spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they came close to God and they died. So presumably Aaron must have been very afraid to come close to God, because maybe he'll die. He didn't know why they died. We still don't know exactly why they died. And he must have been very afraid. And this is going to be a recipe of how to come close to God. And this is going to be the precise ritual. So Seth is absolutely correct. It's the most of the reading is not a narrative, but a ritual proscribed to Aaron. But it's based off of just a tremendous sense of pain. And that's how Rashi seems to discuss it. Rashi says, why does it say after the death of the two sons of Aaron? Ma Talmud Omar, Rashi says, why is the Torah saying this? So, Haya Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Moshelo Mashal. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who we remember from the Seder night, he says, behold, I was like 70 years old. He would explain with a parable. To a sick person, a doctor entered to treat the sick person. Amaro, the doctor said, Al tochal tzonin, don't eat cold food. Al tishkav batachav, don't lie down in a damp place. Ba'acher, a different doctor came along and said to him, Al tochal tzonin, al tishkav batachav, shelo tamut, kederach shemei misploni. Don't do these things or else you're going to die. Because that's what happened to this person, that he did this. He went out and caught the flu and he got sick and he died. So you should not do that. The second doctor's warning hit home. As you can understand why. First person, if you don't say the consequence of your actions, you're not going to threaten people. Therefore it states, Acharei Mot Shnei b'nei Aaron. Therefore it states, after the death of the two sons of Aaron. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, Daber al Aaron, Achicha v'al yavo, Shelo yamut k'derach shemesu banav. So that's what God is saying to Moshe now. Speak to your brother Aaron and tell him not to come so he doesn't end up dying like his sons died. So it's a warning. If you do this, you're going to die like your sons. Seems pretty harsh, but we're trying to protect Aaron. And in fact, the Talmud has a long tradition of high priests dying because they didn't know what they were doing. The high priest position became a position that unfortunately was not always filled by worthy candidates. And the Talmud says, especially in the years leading up to the temple, that they ended up dying. They achieved their position through political connections rather than through piety and righteousness in the second temple. In the first temple too, we had problems with the Kohanim. We had problems with some Kohanim who were not worthy, but they were masquerading as holy people. But remember, we had Elijah defeats the Kohanim of Baal, the priests of Baal, who were trying to say that they were holy. So we have people masquerading as religious figures. It's an old problem. Rashi says, okay, the second verse, God says to Moshe, you're not allowed to come whenever you want into the sanctuary, from the main sanctuary to the behind the curtain. You can't go in. Remember that the sanctuary of the temple, there was a large room and then a curtain, and then back of the curtain was the ark, and that was called the Holy of Holies. So you're not allowed to come there whenever you want. If you come whenever you want, you'll die. Because the only time you can come is when I appear on the, or because in a cloud I will appear on the curtain. That's what way Rashi reads it. Rashi reads it that God is always appearing. That's the place on earth where God's presence is most physically felt. Where is the place on earth where God's presence is most physically felt? Inside the Holy of Holies, there's an ark. In that ark has next to it, on the edges of the ark, these kruvim, these figures, cherub-like figures, angelic figures, with their hands stretched out, and their hands are stretched out, almost touching each other, and there's a hairbreadth space in between the two hands. That space is where God is. That hairbreadth space, that's where God's presence comes down in the cloud above the curtain, above the kaporet, which is the cover of the ark. And the only time the whole year where somebody was able to go in was Aaron on Yom Kippur, and he goes in twice, and that's it. Goes in and then does his thing, and then he comes out and retrieves the shovel.
But it doesn't exist anymore, right?
We don't have the ark anymore.
Yeah.
So the ark is lost, but we do believe we know where that place is, and that place is in the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. And there's I've never been in there, but there's apparently a very powerful stone there called the foundation stone. And that's the stone where the world was created from. And that's the place where the ark used to sit. So that place would be.
Muhammad's chariot left from that stone. I was in there in the 80s when you go there.
So
The stone's still there?
Oh,
yeah, the stone is the foundational stone. The whole world was created from it.
The ark is still there.
The ark, no, the ark.
That window down here, it's huge down here, so it's a huge.
But the ark itself was not only do we not have it today, it went missing towards the end of the first temple. And we do not have the ark from the time of the end of the first temple. We lost the ark.
Does that mean that God is no longer come to the world?
So that's a very good question. So then that's where God physically appeared. So we don't have God's physical presence down there in that same way anymore. No, God was never visible, but God says that's where I will appear in a cloud. With the cloud, I appear upon the ark cover. So that's what the verse says, but we don't have that anymore. Let's see what Rashi says. He will not die. Because if the Kohen Gadol would come when he was not allowed to, he would die. So even the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, the holiest of the holy, was only allowed to come in a very specific manner. And if he came any other time, he would die. For I always appear there in Mamud Anani with my pillar of cloud. So this was your question. Rashi is saying that God appeared not as a cloud, but with a cloud, or not in a cloud, but with a cloud, meaning to say, God is not the cloud, God is coming down with the cloud there. Ufi shegiloi shchinati sham, and because that's where my revelation is. Yizaher shelo yagir lavo. He has to be careful not to come there regularly. That is the simple meaning. Zeu pshuto. For Rabotenu darshu, and the rabbis tell us it means al yavo ki im be'anan haketoret b'yom kippurim. The rabbinic explanation is that the only time Aaron was allowed to come to this place is with the pillar, with the cloud of the incense, which he would, what Aaron would do is he would take fiery coals into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, and he would pour a shovel of incense into a scoop of incense into the coals in the Holy of Holies and make a cloud of incense smoke. And so that's what the rabbis expounded this to mean, that he can only appear with the cloud of incense. Okay, verse 3. Bezos yavo Aaron el HaKodesh. With this, Aaron can come into the sanctuary. Bepar ben bakar, so now we're going to go through the rituals that Aaron would do when coming to the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. And these rituals basically make up the service of Yom Kippur Musaf that we daven today. It's basically just a rabbinic interpretation of these verses was the service on Yom Kippur. So if you ever daven the Yom Kippur service, the repetition of the service is this. The silent Amidah is not this, but it's the repetition of the Amidah of the Musaf service.
Why is the repetition different than the silence?
Well, because presumably, it's a good question, but presumably, I think it's because the silent represents our prayers, and we didn't do this service. It was done by the leader, by the representative, who is the Kohen Gadol. And so therefore, it makes more sense for the Chazan to be going through this whole ritual and chanting it and explaining it.
So it's not really a repetition, it's
Right.
more of you say the prayers yourself, the silence, and then there is
This additional part. There's also other elements which are not said by us. We say about the 10 martyrs. We don't do that in our silent Amidah. It's
complex.
and it's interesting, like Seth said, this doesn't have the emotion of the Rosh Hashanah reading, and he's absolutely correct. But yet, when it's said on Yom Kippur afternoon in the Musaf, it is very emotional. And the rabbis do make emotional additions to it. Like the rabbis talk about the joy at the completion of the service. That's a very well-known song called Mari Cohen, and how everybody was just overwhelmed with joy. And then the rabbis talk about the sadness about not having the service. That's another piyut that we say on Yom Kippur. And then the rabbis talk about the 10 martyrs who were killed, the holy rabbis who were killed. And so the rabbis do make it very emotional. It is interesting that way. Okay, so now verse 3, Bezos yavo Aaron al Kodesh. With this, Aaron could come to the sanctuary, B'par ben bakar lechatas, with a bull for a sin offering, v'ayo le'olah, and a ram as an olah. So Aaron on Yom Kippur has to bring a communal bull as a sin offering and a ram for an olah. Rashi says, this is a unusual Rashi. Rashi says, Bezos is the numerical value of 410. The gematria is Arba Meot Eser, Remez L'Bayit Rishon. This is to tell us that the first base of Mikdash, the first temple, would stand for 410 years. So this is what the commentary here notes. The verse implies that the 18 Kohanim who succeeded Aaron as Kohen Gadol during the period of the first Beis Hamikdash were all righteous men who carried on the tradition of their ancestor Aaron. In this respect, Aaron is considered to have come into the sanctuary for that entire 410-year period. Okay. Bezos yavo Aaron. With this, Aaron shall come. And Rashi says, Va'av zo b'chol eis. This is not to be done at any time, ki im b'yom HaKippurim, except on Yom Kippur. As it states, Besof HaParasha, B'chodesh HaShvi'i B'asor HaChodesh. The only time you can do this is on the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month. Okay. Ketonet Bad Kodesh Yobash. And what does Aaron have to wear? He has to wear a tunic that's made out of linen, with linen pants, and a linen belt he should gird himself, and with a linen hat he shall wrap himself in his hat. Big day kodeshim, these are holy garments, and he shall bathe himself in water and then put them on. So this is unusual because Aaron did not usually dress like this. Aaron did not usually dress in these linen garments. He usually wore the what's called the 8 priestly garments, which had gold in them. But on Yom Kippur, he was told only to wear the linen garments. So what's the reasoning? Rashi says a very powerful phrase. Magid she'eno mishamish lifnim b'shmona begadim shu mishamish b'em b'chutz. That when Aaron would go into the Holy of Holies, he did not wear the golden garments that he wore when he served outside the Holy of Holies. Sheyesh b'hem zahav, because his regular, every Kohen wore 4 garments. The high priest typically wore 8 garments, and but those 8 garments had gold in them. So on Yom Kippur, when he would go into the holiest place, he did not wear the golden garments. Why? And this is the phrase, Lefisha ein kategor nasa senegor. We don't allow the prosecutor to become the defense attorney. Meaning to say that the gold reminds us of the sin of the golden calf. So it'd be inappropriate for Aaron, when he's pleading for our defense, to wear the garments of the prosecutor. So the way to remember that is ein kategor nasa seneger. Don't allow the prosecutor to become the defense attorney, even though it's common practice today that after you work as a U.S. attorney for many years, you then go and get a nice 7-figure salary working for a white shoe law firm. I'm not saying everybody does that, but it is not unusual for a prosecutor to become a defense attorney. But so the rabbis say don't do it. They're all made of linen. So on Yom Kippur, he wore only linen garments. All right, let us dive in now. Mincha.